Suzu's world was a nauseating blur of coarse fabric and the cloying scent of down earth. One moment, she was carefully brushing dust from a Song Dynasty ceramic shard at her university's archaeological dig site. The next, she was stumbling through an ornate, unfamiliar courtyard, the sun beating down with an alien intensity. The trendy sportswear she'd been wearing was gone, replaced by a scratchy, earth-tone tunic and loose-fitting trousers that felt like a costume. "This can't be happening," she mumbled, her voice trembling as she clutched her head. A wave of vertigo washed over her. A dream. It has to be a dream. My graduation project is due next week. I can't be here. Wherever here was. The architecture was all dark wood and intricate latticework, with a stark, elegant simplicity she'd never seen in any textbook. It felt both ancient and alive. Just as her panic began to crest, an older man with kind, worried eyes and hands stained with dried mud rushed to her side. "Miss, are you all right? You were so brave." Pushing my daughter out of the way of that collapsing kill shelf, he bowed deeply, his gratitude palpable. "I am Higong. I owe you a great debt." Susu stared at him, utterly bewildered. "Your daughter? A kill?" She had no memory of any of it. The last thing she remembered was the glint of sunlight on ancient pottery. Before she could process his words, a cold presence sliced through the warm air. A man emerged from the main hall, his shadow falling long and sharp across the courtyard. He was tall and arrestingly handsome, with features as severe and perfect as a classical statue, dressed in ink-black robes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His gaze was glacial, sweeping over Susu with immediate, undisguised suspicion. His eyes fell to the ground near her feet, where several small, crudely shaped clay figurines lay scattered. One had been kicked aside in her confusion. "You have no reverence," he stated, his voice not loud, but carrying a weight that silenced the chirping cicadas. It was a voice like polished stone, smooth and unyielding. "To treat the sacred spirits of the earth with such disrespect is a crime in the Chiashai kingdom." Susu flinched, instinctively taking a step back. "I didn't mean to. I don't know what those are." The man, whom Higong addressed nervously as Mr. Chen, ignored her completely, his obsidian eyes fixed on her face, analyzing every flicker of confusion. "Your accent is foreign. Your clothes, while mimicking our style, are of a strange cut. You appear from nowhere and desecrate the clay. You are from the Liu Jin kingdom, aren't you? A spy?" The accusation was so absurd, so utterly insane, that Susu almost laughed. "A spy? I'm an archaeology student. I need to get back to my university." Her modern terminology only deepened his suspicion. The handsome man Mr. Chen exchanged a silent, meaningful look with Higong. "She saved my daughter's life, sir," Higong pleaded softly, sensing the escalating danger. Mr. Chen's expression didn't soften. A long, tense moment passed before he spoke again, his tone dangerously smooth. "If she is not a spy, then her ignorance is profound. It must be rectified." He turned his chilling gaze back to Susu. "I will take responsibility for her. She will enroll in the Niwa Academy, where I can personally oversee her education in the ways of clay." Higong's face lit up with astonished delight. "The Niwa Academy, sir. That is the most prestigious institution in the kingdom. It is too great an honor." He bowed again and again, pushing a stunned Susu forward. "Thank Mr. Chen." "Thank him." Susu felt a trap closing around her. This wasn't an honor. It was a sentence. She was being placed under the direct surveillance of the man who was already convinced she was an enemy. Days later, she stood in a classroom at the Niwa Academy, a place revered throughout the kingdom. The air smelled of wet clay and something herbal she couldn't identify. To her, it just smelled like mud. She, who had dedicated her life to studying the finished, 5 products of history. Found the raw material utterly repulsive. The instructor was meticulously demonstrating brushstrokes on a large scroll, but the characters were an ancient, alien script she couldn't decipher. She felt like an illiterate child, lost and profoundly stupid. Her clumsy attempts to knead a lump of clay as instructed drew snickers from the students around her. A sharp-faced girl with an elaborate hairstyle and expensive-looking robes, Zua, scoffed loudly. Look at her. She handles the sacred earth like it's garbage. How did someone so talentless get into Niwa? She smirked, her voice dripping with venom. Oh, that's right. I heard Mr. Chen brought you here himself. You must have other talents. The room erupted in harsh, malicious laughter. Suzu's face burned with humiliation, her hands freezing over the formless, sticky lump of clay. She had never felt so cornered, so utterly alone. That's enough. The voice cut through the nose, instantly silencing the room. Song Yichen Mr. Chen stood at the doorway, his presence commanding absolute obedience. He walked slowly toward her, his gaze sweeping over the jeering students before landing on her. He didn't look at her with kindness, but with an unnerving possessiveness. He stopped beside her workstation, picking up her pathetic attempt at a bowl. She is clumsy because her foundation is weak, he announced to the class, his voice echoing in the sudden stillness. And she is here because I brought her. From this day forward, she is my close disciple. Any insult to her is an insult to me. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air, then turned his piercing gaze on Susu. But she will have to prove she is worthy of my instruction. Later, in his private study, a room filled with magnificent ceramic masterpieces, Susu finally found her voice. I don't want to be your disciple. I don't care about mud. I just want to go home. Song Yichen didn't even look up from the scroll he was examining. Refusing my tutelage is an option, he said coolly. Of course, I would then be obligated to report the foreign woman who appeared under suspicious circumstances and desecrated sacred figurines to the royal guard. Their methods of interrogation are thorough. Ice flooded Suzu's veins. It was blackmail, plain and simple. Her freedom, her very survival in this bizarre, ancient world, now depended on placating this cold, suspicious man and mastering a skill she actively despised. You will prove yourself, he continued, finally lifting his eyes to meet hers. They held no warmth, only the cold glint of a challenge. Or you will face the consequences. He gestured to a towering stack of scrolls on a nearby table. Begin with these. They are the foundational texts on the 5 elemental souls. You have until the new moon to master them. Left alone in the silent, intimidating study, Susu stared at the rolls of parchment covered in inscrutable characters. Her heart sank. This wasn't just a classroom. It was a prison. And the key to her escape was buried somewhere in a language she couldn't read and a pile of mud she couldn't stand to touch. The sun beat down on the barren training grounds of Niwa Academy, baking the earth into a cracked mosaic. Mr. Chen, a man whose stony expression seemed carved from the very clay he worshipped, pointed a gnarled finger at a patch of reddish dirt. Taste it. Susu stared at him, then at the ground, a wave of revulsion washing over her. You can't be serious. For 3 days, this had been her training. Not sculpting, not glazing, but a forced march up and down the dusty hills surrounding the academy, punctuated by these humiliating rituals. The tongue knows what the eyes cannot see, he intoned, his voice as dry as the dust at her feet. It knows the balance of sand and stone, the heart of the earth. You claim to be a student of clay, yet you refuse to know it intimately. A spy from Liu Jin would be just as hesitant. The accusation, worn thin from OVs, still stung. With a grimace, Susu knelt, scooping a tiny pinch of soil. The gritty, metallic tang that flooded her mouth was vile. She spat, wiping her tongue with the back of her hand. It's astringent, high iron content. Her modern geology knowledge was a curse. a secret she couldn't explain. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Mr. Shen," she began, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, how many times must I say it? How many piles of dirt do I have to eat before you believe me? I'm not a spy," he merely grunted, turning his back on her. "Your actions, not your words, will prove your loyalty. The East Furnace awaits. You will fire your horse sculpture tonight. Do not fail." Later that evening, the oppressive heat of the furnace room was a suffocating blanket. The air shimmered above the brick kiln, the roar of the fire a constant, hungry drone. Exhaustion gnawed at Susu. Her back ached. Her mind was a fog of frustration and homesickness, and the rhythmic crackle of the flames was a hypnotic lullaby. Her head drooped, her chin sinking to her chest, and the world faded into a dreamless dark. A sharp, violent crack shattered her sleep. Her eyes flew open to a scene of imminent disaster. The furnace door had buckled, and angry orange flames licked out from the seams. The clay bricks groaned under the intense, unregulated heat, a fine web of fractures spreading across their surface. She had forgotten to open the vent. Pressure was building. It was going to explode. Before she could scramble back, a powerful arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her from her feet. The world became a dizzying blur of motion as she was half dragged, half carried away from the kill. A deafening boom erupted behind them, and the structure collapsed in on itself, sending a shower of glowing embers and superheated air across the courtyard. Susu landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath, the heat scorching her back even from a distance. A man's body shielded hers from the worst of the debris. When the rain of sparks subsided, she looked up into the severe, moonlit face of Song Yichen. His robes were singed, his expression an unreadable mask of fury and something else. His hand was still planted firmly on her waist, the warmth of his palm seeping through the thin fabric of her clothes, a shocking point of contact in this brutally impersonal world. She pushed him away, scrambling to her feet. "I didn't ask for your help." The words came out sharper than she intended, a knee-jerk reaction to his constant suspicion and the propriety of his touch. A strange heat, entirely separate from the fire, bloomed on her cheeks. Song Yichen ignored her outburst. His gaze was fixed on the wreckage, where a single object had been thrown clear by the blast. He strode over and picked it up. It was her clay horse, miraculously intact. The intense, uncontrolled heat had flash-fired it, giving it a strange, iridescent sheen. "Hollow," he murmured, turning it over in his hands. He ran a thumb over its perfectly balanced legs and the delicate arch of its neck. "The walls are uniformly thin. The internal structure is reinforced. These are not the techniques of a novice." He looked at her, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure suspicion. "These are the methods of the Liu Jin raw artisans. It's just a way to save material and ensure it doesn't crack during firing," she stammered, her heart sinking. Every piece of knowledge she possessed only served to condemn her further. He gave a cold, humorless smile. A convenient explanation. He placed the horse back on the ground and walked away, leaving her alone with the ruins of her work and the smouldering embers of his distrust. Days later, seeking an escape, Susu wandered through the clamor of the city market. The vibrant chaos was a welcome distraction until she spotted a pawnshop owner arguing with a customer over a shattered clay tablet. The owner was about to sweep the pieces into the gutter when Susu intervened. "Wait, I can fix it." Using a sticky rice paste mixed with egg white, a simple, the effective adhesive she knew from her restoration studies, she meticulously reassembled the artifact. The shopkeeper was amazed, pressing a few coins into her hand. As she turned to leave, a cold voice stopped her. "Your talents are endless, it seems." Song Yichen stood behind her, his expression glacial. He held up a small, ornate token, an exact replica of the symbol on the tablet she had just repaired. "This is a golden order," he said, his voice low and menacing. A summons for every Liu Jin spy in the capital. The man you just helped was one of their couriers, and last night, an Imperial guard who was tracking him was found dead. Murdered. He stepped closer, invading her space until she could see the flecks of gold in his dark, accusing eyes. You didn't just fix a trinket, you activated a network of assassins. Tell me again how you are not a spy. Panic seized her. It's a coincidence. I saw something broken and I fixed it. I didn't know. His disbelief was a physical force, pushing her back. He saw her not as a lost student, but as a murderer, a conspirator. Before she could plead further, a burlap sack was thrown over her head from behind, and the world went black. She awoke on a damp stone floor, her hands bound. The sack was ripped from her head, revealing a cavernous, torchlit lair. Several figures in black masks surrounded her. The Golden Guard head has arrived, one of them rasped. Suzu's mind reeled. Head. They think I'm their leader. A figure stepped out of the shadows, pulling down his mask. His face was chillingly familiar. It was Tang Shimron, the kind, helpful classmate from the academy who had offered her a warm bun on her first day. His friendly smile was gone, replaced by a look of cunning appraisal. Greetings. I am Tang Shinron, 6th Prince of Liu Jin Kingdom. He gestured to the assembled spies. They were expecting their new leader, a master artisan whose symbol is the flying horse. Your reputation, it seems, preceded you. He held up a piece of parchment bearing a crude drawing of her clay horse. It was the summons. Suzu's blood ran cold. She was trapped. To Tiashai, she was a Liu Jin spy. To Liu Jin, she was their new commander. Song Yichen wanted her dead. These men wanted her to lead them. She was caught in a lethal double game. Survival instincts kicked in. She had to play along. Straightening her back, she adopted an air of authority she didn't feel. Report, she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. Later, after a tense briefing, she offered them a special water she'd prepared, claiming it was a loyalty toast. They drank eagerly. It wasn't a loyalty elixir. It was a potent sedative she concocted from poppy seeds and nightshade berries procured at the market. A bit of modern pharmacology in an ancient world. One by one, they slumped to the floor, unconscious. Standing over the sleeping spies, a desperate plan formed in her mind. There was only one way out. She would drag every last one of them to Song Yichen's feet and force him, finally, to see the truth. The air in the Niwa Academy exam hall was thick with the scent of ink and silent desperation. For the students of clay arts, the history exam on the Tiashai Kingdom and Nisu was a formidable gatekeeper. Failure meant immediate expulsion, a disgrace that would follow them for life. Suzu's fingers felt slick with sweat as she gripped her brush. The intricate, ancient characters swam before her eyes, a language she could speak but barely write. Every stroke was a gamble. Panic called in her stomach. Hidden beneath her desk was her lifeline and her greatest liability. Her modern notebook, filled with simplified characters and historical notes from her own world. It was a crutch, a translation tool she used for study. But in this context, it was a death sentence. A sharp gasp sliced through the silence. A classmate named Wei, his face a mask of sanctimonious righteousness, shot to his feet, pointing a trembling finger. Mr. Chen. Suzu is cheating. Every head turned. Mr. Chen. A stern man whose face seemed permanently carved from granite, strode down the aisle. He snatched the notebook from Suzu's lap, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the alien script. What is this gibberish? It's not for cheating. Suzu's voice cracked, rising in a desperate plea. It's my own writing system, from my hometown. It helps me understand. She knew how insane it sounded. The weight of her impossible secret pressed down, threatening to crush her. This was it. She would be branded a cheater, then exposed as a spy and executed. Just as Mr. Chen's hand clamped down on her shoulder, a sudden, violent roar erupted from the back of the hall. Figures cloaked in black, their faces obscured, vaulted over the desks. With swift, brutal efficiency, they swept through the room, not attacking the students, but the exams themselves. Stacks of papers were doused in oil and set ablaze. Inkpots were smashed, their contents arcing through the air like black rain. The hall descended into screaming chaos. Susu stared, utterly bewildered. The spies from Liu Jin, the ones who supposedly answered to her, were destroying the evidence of her failure. It made no sense. The air on the Niwa Academy grounds was thick with dust and skepticism. Lined up before a row of temporary kins, the finest students of the Tiashai Kingdom prepared their clays for the hardness of soul competition, a final, grueling test of their craft. Hisusu stood apart, her station a small island of quiet industry amidst a sea of murmurs. Song Yichen approached her, his usual armor of suspicion replaced by calculated intensity. He had watched her, seen the flicker of something genuine beneath the defiant exterior. He had seen the way Zuyu's betrayal had wounded but not broken her. Now, he would make his wager. Hisusu, he said, his voice a low command that cut through the noise. Forget the gossip. Forget the accusations. Prove yourself here. If your creation withstands the master's hammer, I will grant you access to the sacred goddess statue. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. The goddess statue, the very reason she had endured this farce. It was the key, the one artifact that might explain how she had ended up in this ancient world. A spark of her old fire returned, fueled by grief for her late mentor and a desperate need for answers. You have a deal, she stated, her voice steady. With a new purpose, Susu ignored the scornful glances from Zhu Yue and the others. They needed their clays with practiced, traditional movements. Susu, however, began to work differently. She collected discarded wood scraps, piling them into her kiln with a strange, methodical layering. Then, she sealed the kiln's fence with wet clay, leaving only a tiny opening. What is she doing? One student whispered. Zhu Yue sneered, loud enough for all to hear. Is she burning firewood or making pottery? The spies finally lost her mind. Laughter rippled through the onlookers. Susu paid them no mind. In her world, this was basic science. By restricting the oxygen supply, she was creating charcoal, a substance that burned far hotter and cleaner than wood. It was the secret behind the legendary strength of Gangmu Kingdom's lost pottery techniques, a historical footnote she'd studied with her adopted father. Here, it was a forgotten magic she was about to resurrect. For hours, she tended the smoldering kiln, a lone figure wreathed in acrid smoke. When the time came, the other students presented their elegant, perfectly formed faces and bricks. The master's hammer struck, and most held firm, earning polite applause. Then, all eyes turned to Susu. She unsealed her kiln. Instead of a pristine ceramic, she pulled out a small, lumpy, blackish rock. More laughter erupted. Zhu Yue covered her mouth, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Susu placed the lump on the anvil without a word. The master, his face a mask of doubt, lifted the heavy steel hammer. He brought it down with a mighty swing. Clang. The sound was not the dull thud of clay breaking, but a high, ringing report. The hammer bounced off the black lump, leaving not so much as a scratch. A collective gasp silenced the crowd. The master, stunned, struck again, harder, clang, and again, clang. The hammerhead itself began to show faint dents. The lump remained pristine, gleaming under the harsh sun as if mocking the steel. Impossible, the master breathed, lowering the hammer. It's not clay, Susu announced, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. It is the purified essence of the earth, born of fire, starved of its breath. I call it diamond. She explained the process in terms they could almost understand, speaking of controlling the fire's soul and forcing a wood to surrender its spirit into the clay. It was a beautiful, poetic lie that cloaked a scientific truth only she and her father could have known. Song Yichen stared, his mind reeling. Her methods were alien, her results miraculous. This was not the trickery of a Liu Jin spy. It was knowledge from another world entirely. The last vestiges of his suspicion dissolved, replaced by a profound, unsettling awe. She had won. That evening, he led her away from the academy, through a series of guarded stone corridors deep beneath the palace. They stopped before a pair of immense, jade inlaid doors. "Here," he said, his voice heavy, "the chamber of the goddess Niwa." Inside, a colossal statue of a serene woman towered over them, her face sorrowful. At her feet, on a stone altar, lay a jade seal broken clean in two. "Our legends speak of an angel queen who will descend from the heavens to mend the world," Song Yichen explained, his gaze fixed on the fractured artifact. "The Niwa jade seal has been broken for a century. It is the only thing that maintains the fragile piece, but its power is fading. The Liu Jin armies gather at our borders, sensing a weakness. If the seal is not repaired, Chiashai will fall." Susu stared at the clean break, the precise crystalline structure. It wasn't a magical artifact, it was a complex geological formation. With the right tools and knowledge she could fix it. "You need a restorer," she said, finally understanding her purpose. "We need a miracle," he corrected. "We need you." She met his gaze, the weight of an entire kingdom settling on her shoulders. A faint, wry smile touched her lips. "So, you're telling me the fate of your world rests on me because you grown men can't glue a rock back together?" The joke was thin, a fragile shield against the enormity of the task. But it was her. A rare, fleeting smile crossed his face before it vanished, replaced by a look of sudden alarm. "Get down," he yelled, shoving her behind the altar. A sharp whistle cut through the air. An arrow, its tip a sinister black, embedded itself deep in Song Yichen's shoulder. He cried out, stumbling back against the statue. Guards rushed in, clashing with shadowy assassins who had emerged from hidden alcoves. Susu scrambled to his side, her hands instantly covered in his warm blood. The wound was already turning a venomous purple. "Poison," he gasped, his breath coming in ragged pants. He fumbled inside his robe, pressing a sealed letter and a carved wooden token into her hand. "The letter explains the properties of the jade. Take this token, show it to the palace guard, they will help you." His eyes, full of pain and a desperate, burgeoning affection, locked onto hers. Tears welled, tracing paths through the grime on his face. "Susu, you must complete the mission. The kingdom, I am entrusting it all to you." His body went limp, his head slumping against her shoulder. The sounds of battle faded into a dull roar in her ears. She looked at the blood on her hands, at the precious letter he had given her, at the broken seal on the altar. Heartbreak warred with a terrifying, hardening resolve. He had sacrificed himself for this mission, for her. She would not let him down. Clutching his final words, and the fate of this world in her hand, Susu turned towards the darkness of the chamber. Her destiny awaited. The air in the grand hall was cold and ancient, heavy with the dust of centuries, and the scent of damp clay. It clung to Susu's clothes, a second skin she had worn since her arrival. Before her, on a stone pedestal directly beneath the sorrowful gaze of the colossal goddess statue, lay the fractured heart of the Chiashai kingdom. The Niwa jade seal. Its pieces were a puzzle of sorrow, its once vibrant green clouded with a deathly grey. Suzu's fingers, stained with earth and minerals, trembled as she unfolded Song Yichen's letter one last time. His script, usually so precise and controlled, was weakened. The ink bled slightly where his hand must have faltered. It wasn't just a set of instructions. It was a confession of faith. He had detailed the seal's hidden structural flaws, known only to the royal line, and entrusted her with the kingdom's final hope. He had given her his trust, absolute and unconditional. That trust was a greater weight than the broken artifact itself. Taking a deep breath, she began. Her modern knowledge, once a source of suspicion, was now her greatest weapon. The royal artisans had tried to mend the seal with traditional resins and glues, but the divine energy embedded within the jade rejected them. Susu, however, understood the material on a molecular level. She had spent the last 3 days in the royal apothecary, not praying for miracles, but engineering one, using a precise ratio of crushed pearl powder for its crystalline structure, a rare, viscous tree sap for its bonding properties, and a pinch of volcanic ash for its thermal resilience, a technique she'd read about in a paper on Roman concrete. She had created a binding agent the jade might accept. She worked with the focus of a surgeon, a delicate silver tool, one she had forged herself, applied the paste into the fractures. Her movements were slow, reverent. With each piece she set, her thoughts drifted. She thought of the angel queen, the woman from another world who had first crafted this seal. Was she also an outcast? Did she feel this same crushing loneliness, this same desperate need to protect a home that wasn't hers? Susu felt an invisible thread connecting them across the gulf of time to women, stranded by fate, using their knowledge to build rather than destroy. This wasn't just about repairing an object. It was about mending a history, validating her own torturous journey from suspected spy to savior. Every insult from the court ministers, every cold glare from Song Yichin in those early days, every moment of fear and humiliation, it all funneled into the sharp point of her concentration. She channeled it all into her work, her apology and her defiance mixed into the very paste that would heal the kingdom. Finally, the last piece slid into place. The seal was whole again, but the cracks were still visible, a network of fine, dark lines marring its surface. It remained inert, a beautiful but lifeless stone. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through her focus. Had she failed? Was her modern science just arrogance in the face of true magic? She gently placed her palms over the seal, closing her eyes. She didn't pray. Instead, she remembered the core principle of her archaeological restoration studies: respect the material's history. She didn't try to force her will upon it. She simply offered her energy, her hope, her quiet understanding. "I'm like you," she thought, directing the sentiment at the seal, at the queen's legacy within it. "I'm a foreigner. I'm broken, but I am here to help." At first, nothing. The stone remained cold. Then, a faint hum vibrated through her palms, so low it was more a feeling than a sound. A soft, emerald light began to pulse from within the jade, originating from the very cracks she had just filled. The light traced the web of her repairs, turning the dark lines into rivers of glowing energy. The grey clouds on the surface dissolved, revealing the deep, vibrant green of living jade.